just for her. All right, number one, Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes throws 19 touchdown passes in his first 6 games. How many touchdown passes would you expect him to have at the end of the 17-game regular season? One of the rules they changed in 2020, or actually took place this season, 2021 season, was to change from 16 to 17 regular season games. Would I set up a proportion or use a decimal here? What do you think, Cole?
You could do a proportion.
I totally would.
19/6.
Okay, cool. So 19/6. So 19 touchdowns over 6 games. That's his touchdown ratio. And by the way, if I divided that, that would give me touchdowns per game. That's called a unit rate. Exactly, that touchdowns per game. I don't need the unit rate here. What I do need is another ratio. And Cole said that 19 touchdowns in 6 games would be X touchdowns out of a total of 17 games. And that's why I like to label my proportion, so I can know where the 17 goes and I know where the X goes. All right, with your calculators at the ready, I'll do 6 times X. Ezra, will you do 19 times 17 for me, please? I'm ready. 323. Okay. And Ethan Moore, will you divide by 6 to see what X is going to be?
Um, 53.83.
Okay. And just the 3 that repeats?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, our instructions want us to round to the nearest whole number because you can't throw a partial touchdown pass, right? Like they don't count that. You either throw it or you don't. So, Ethan, would that round to 53 or 54 touchdown passes?
53. No, not 54.
The 8 would bump it. You're right. So we're going to say that 54 touchdown passes would be his projected total. And so anytime you've heard someone say they're on pace for fill in the blank, how many home runs, touchdowns, wins, whatever, they're using a proportion and they're cross multiplying, or actually there's a computer program that's probably doing that. Okay, that was programmed by someone who does programming and also probably has a math degree. All right, number 2. Golden State Warriors point guard Stephen Curry has hit 42.8% of his 3-point shots in his career. How many 3-point shots do you think he'd make if he attempted 800 shots in a season? Now they play, I think, 82 games in a season. And so that's a little less than 10 3-point shots a night. Shots, not makes, just shots, which I think is probably typical for him. So Cole, I'm not going to call on you. You've already spoken. Would I set up a proportion for this one, or would I use the decimal form? What would be the easiest, Austin? Use decimal form, exactly. They're giving us the probability of him making a 3-point shot as a percentage. Austin, what is 42.8% in a decimal form? Now that's percent form. Remember, we have to slide the decimal backwards. How many times? 2 times. What would that give us? Point and the next digit, which is 8. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I know that can be confusing. You can have a percent in your decimal. It does not make that decimal form. Okay, to go from percent to decimal, you still have to slide the decimal backwards 2 spots, which is why we're going with 0.428. So he's going to make 42.8% of his shots. What does of mean? Haley? Multiply. That's why we're multiplying. So you're either going to cross multiply if you set up a proportion, or you're going to straight up multiply by a decimal. And that's what we're going to do here. And what are we going to multiply the 0.428 to? Cole?
800.
The 800 shots, whatever that sample is. We're sampling his entire season, which is 800 shots. Kaylee, what is 0.428 times 800? Okay. And because we're going to the nearest whole number, Elijah, would that be closer to 342 or 343 shots? Yeah, it's actually going to stay the same. 342 3-pointers. Which, if you can do some simple math there and figure out how many points that would be, just as 3-point total points, that's a lot. All right, number 3, Los Angeles Angels center fielder Mike Trout has a batting average, which is your hits divided by your at-bats, of .347. And that stat is current as of this Wednesday. About how many hits would you expect him to have if he gets 550 at-bats in a season? Should we use the proportion format or the decimal format? What do you think, Addison? Clearly, yeah. So we don't even have to move the decimal point because it's not a percent. They're actually giving us the probability as a decimal. So we're just going to use the .347, which, by the way, is a very good batting average, especially in the major leagues. That means he gets a hit 34.7% of the time, and he doesn't get a hit, AKA he fails 65% of the time. Baseball's one of the few sports I can think of where you can fail 7 times out of 10 and get paid $40 million a year. It's really hard to hit a baseball. Okay, that batting average is really good for the major leagues. Now, again, like I said, the other 65% of the time, he's not getting on base. Unless it's a walk, which that doesn't count as an at-bat though.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to multiply that to the sample of 550 at-bats. Addison, go ahead and tell us what you get.
109.5.
All right. And Callie, would that be closer to 190 hits or 191 hits? Perfect. Yeah, we're going to round that one up because the 8 is close enough. 5 or more, raise the score. 4 or less, let it rest. Yeah, I actually had never heard that until you guys, not you guys, but you guys there's a group of students I've had. I was going to say I've had students come up for a few years now that have been saying that. So I like it. It's catchy. Number 4, Pittsburgh Penguins center. This is a hockey problem. Sidney Crosby, AKA Sid the Kid, not a kid anymore, has a shooting percentage of 14.6%. So he's making a goal every 14.6% of his shots, which is really low, but that's actually really good. It's hard to hit. It's hard to score in hockey, especially when you have a goalie that takes up the size of the net, pretty much. How many goals would you expect him to have if he takes 250 shots? Is this a proportion or decimal problem? Hardarsh? Decimal. We'll do it again. Okay. So Hardarsh, we're going to take this percentage and write it as a decimal.
0.14.
Okay. Yep. By moving the decimal backwards 2 spots. And Mackenzie, what are we going to times that decimal to? Yep. His sample of 250 shots. Okay. Riley, what will you get when you multiply the 0.146 to the 250? Okay, 36.5. And Mackenzie, would that round to 36 or 37 shots or goals? 37 goals. We'll just say goals. Yeah, 37 goals. Yeah, that one's barely. I mean, if he made 36, it wouldn't shock me, right? That's still, but 5 or more, we're going to raise that to 37. All right, there's the front side of your worksheet done. So for your work papers for 10.2 and 10.3, obviously, if I'm asking you, what's the probability of pulling a blue shirt out of your closet? You're probably not going to have any work for that unless you wrote 2/10 = 1/5. You just have a fraction, reduced fraction. It was the ones where you were making a prediction. There are 25 rubber duckies. The chances of getting a winning rubber duck is 0.24. How many non-winning rubber duckies are there? That's the kind of stuff where you're making a prediction like that, where you would show your work. And that's what we're doing here. You can either use a proportion or you can use, now, this isn't to say that I couldn't use a proportion. For this last problem, what are all percents out of 100? So I could say 14.6 out of 100 is how many shots out of 250? And I could totally set up a proportion and I'll get 36.5. I just think it's easier when they give you the percent or decimal probability we just go ahead and use that as a decimal and multiply. All right, number 5. Indianapolis Colts / Denver Broncos quarterback Peyton Manning has a total of 539 touchdown passes in his 266 regular season games in his career. If he were to come out of retirement, which he's not going to, he's probably making just as much money doing Monday Night Football stuff with his brother, which I'm sure is a lot more fun, if not more. If he were to come out of retirement to play one more 17-game season, he never actually got to play a 17-game season. He always played 16-game seasons because that rule change didn't take effect until after he retired. One more season. I need to just tell you how many games it was in order for us to solve the problem. So if he came out of retirement now, it'd be a 17-game season. How many touchdown passes would you expect him to end his career with? So we have a couple different ways we could do this. We could find out how many touchdown passes he'd throw this season based on his results, his probabilities, and we could add that onto his total, or we could just go straight up and get our answer with the total included, which is probably what I would do, be the easiest way. So similar to the Patrick Mahomes question on the front side, how many touchdowns has he thrown? Okay, 539. And how many games has it taken him to get that? 266. Again, you could divide that, and that would give your touchdown per game unit rate. And then you could times that by 17 and figure out how many touchdowns that would be in a 17-game season. But I think it's going to be easier to go ahead and do this. If he throws 539 touchdowns in 266 games, then how many touchdowns would he throw? And then you could plug in 17 games, but again, that's not going to be the answer. It wants to know how many you expect him to end his career with. So instead of getting 17 and then adding that on, I could just take the 17 games and add them on to his total number of games. So if he's played 266 and he were to play one more season, how many games would that mean he's played in his career now, Allie? 283. So we'll say 283 games. And then by solving for X, we'll have our final answer. I'll do the 266 times X. Ethan, can you tell me, Ethan Edison, the 539 times 283, please?
28,000.
Is that what you said? Is that what everyone else got?
No.
What'd you get, Allie? So 152,000. Okay. Oops, too much. Say it again louder, Allie. 152,000 and what? 537. Okay. All right. So now we'll divide that by 266. Sam, will you divide that by 266, please? $573.44. Okay. And Austin, would that be closer to 573 or 574 touchdowns? Yeah, it's gonna be closer, just barely to 573. Okay, so we'd expect him to end his career now with 573. That's obviously assuming that he had the same arm that he on average had during his career, which he probably does not have at this point. And he was able to average that same amount. So 573, if you do a little subtraction there, you find out that that's a difference of 34 touchdowns. That's how many he averaged. Okay. Yes. Yes, you do still have to fill in the ones you missed, okay? Okay. Number 6, New York Yankees first baseman Anthony Rizzo. Oh, I hate saying that. Has hit 8 home runs in his first 17 games. Again, this stat is current as of Wednesday. He is currently leading the league with home runs. How many home runs would you expect him to hit in a 162 game regular season? Which is how many they play in baseball. Proportion or decimal? Julia? Proportion. Julia, what would this proportion say? Okay, so 8 home runs in 17 games would give you how many home runs in 162 games is what she just said. And that's exactly right. And we just cross multiply that. Natalie, can you tell me what 8 times 162 is? I'll do 17 times X.
496.
Okay, good. And Allie, will you divide that by 17, please? Okay. And Julia, is that closer to 76 or 77 home runs?
76.
Closer to 76 home runs. The single season home run record is held by Barry Bonds. You might have heard of him before.
498, because he was on steroids.
No, 73. So this Anthony Rizzo's current pace that he's on, if he were to continue that pace over the course of the season, would give him the home run total by home run record by 3 home runs without steroids. Yeah, exactly. I don't think Anthony Rizzo will be able to continue this pace for an entire year. I'd love to see that, but we're 17 games in, 162 total, so we still 140 some to go. He's probably not going to continue that pace. He's pretty good. All right, next one. Phoenix Mercury guard Diana Taurasi has an average free throw percentage of 87 for her career. If she shoots 15 free throws in her next game, how many would you expect her to make? Proportion or decimal? What do you think, Elijah? Proportion or decimal? Okay. Can you turn 87% into a decimal for me? 0 point what? 87, okay. And what are we going to multiply that to? The 15 shots that she takes. Exactly. She's going to make 87% of her shots. Okay. Landon, can you tell me what 0.87 times 15 is? 13.05. And Landon, is that closer to 13 or 14 shots? You sure? 13.05. That's 13. Okay. Not 13.5, but 13.05. Yeah, it's gonna be closer to 13. FT stands for free throws. She'll make 13 out of 15, or at least that's what you'd expect. She could make all 15. And that would actually increase her percentage by a very, 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 very small margin because she's been playing for a long time. If that's her career free throw percentage, making 15 out of 15 is not going to increase that by a whole lot. Maybe a few hundreds or a few, thousands or 100,000 of a decimal point. Eventually, if she makes all of her free throws and continues to do that, you bump up to 88%, 89%. It'd take a while.
Or 45.
Of course, a rookie coming into the NBA, or in this case, the WNBA, they're every night they do take free throws. It's going to have a pretty drastic change on their career free throw percentage because their career is that one season so
Like
far.
LaMelo Ball.
There you go. Who is the rookie of the year, right? Did they give that award out yet?
Yeah, I think.
I think he won it. I can't imagine anybody else getting it. All right, number 8, our final one. The Chicago Cubs, this is not true this season, unfortunately, have a record of 14 wins and 11 losses this season. How, it's actually, you're right, it's close to the other way around. How many wins do you expect them to have at the end of a 162 game regular season? Now, this one's a little tricky. Let me ask you this to start with. Proportion or decimal? Kaylee? Proportion. Kaylee, be careful here. What do you think your proportion should say?
14 over 25.
Excellent. 14 out of 25. Now, where's the 25 come from? Well, explain.
Well, you have 14 wins in order. Obviously,
That's correct. You can't do 14 wins out of 11 losses because then when it comes time to put the 162 in, you can't put it in the win or the loss column so that you can't write your proportion that way. What we can do is we could change the losses into total games, We could say if you've won 14, if your record's 14-11, that means you've won 14 out of your 25 games. So how many would you win out of your 162 games? Excellent job. Riley, can you do the 14 times 162, please? I'll do the 25 times X. Okay. Hardarsh, you want to divide by 25, please?
Okay. I got 90.72.
Okay. And Sam, is that closer to 90 or 91 wins? That's right. 91 wins, which actually would be probably good enough to get you a wild card spot. My guess would be probably around that. Maybe, I mean, in a bad division, that'd be the division lead, but probably a wild card, which means you can make the playoffs, which is kind of crazy because they only have 3 more wins than losses. But over the course of 162 games, that'd give them 91 wins, subtract from 162, and 71 losses. So actually, at that point, they'd have 20 more wins, which is a pretty big margin. Allie, you had a question. You are ready to turn this in on Google Classroom. Go ahead and do that right now.